Good evening, everyone.
Kabot Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
For some reason, it's not going into Facebook. I don't know why, but anyway, I guess we'll start. Does everybody hear me there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. Just the Facebook is not going. Okay, what can we do? We'll upload it afterwards to Facebook. We'll have to do it the indirect way. Okay. I'll try one more time. I'll test my luck. No, it's not going. No, sorry. Okay, then. Okay. Okay. So I think we finished the chapter in the tour, at least. Let me just check in a bit Yosef. Seems like there's more bit Yosef. Okay, so anyway. Yeah, so we finished the tour yesterday, and we talked about the issue of the leftover oil from the candles. That we said, right, that you can use the leftovers the next day, but the problem is the last day when there is no next day. So there we said you got to burn it. And the Bet Yosef is talking about that issue. So it says here, King Katav Arosh Bepek Bameh Madlikin. That's what it says in the Rosh, Beshem Asher Tot, name of this rabbi, the Rav Achai, this book, Ve'amordechi Beshem Ilamdenu Ufsikta Rabati, and the Mordechai also read all these rabbis in these books. Ve'im Tamar Ve'hare Katav Rabbeinu, but if you ask me, right, regarding this, but didn't the two already write in Siman Tafresh Ein Bet, right? In this chapter, we already did that before. You have to give it, you have to put in there the proper amount of oil, right? That it should burn for a half hour. So the Torah said there, right, as we mentioned yesterday, that if you put more, you got extra. So it already burned for a half hour. There's still leftovers there. So there you can write lechabotah. You can you can extinguish it because it's the mitzvah is already done. לאחר שעבר זה הזמן, וכן יכול להשתמש לאורה, also you can use it, right? The lights, you can get benefit from it. לאחר זה הזמן, after this time. שעבר עיקר מצוותה, so the mitzvah already passed, וגם הריף והראש, and also the rif and the rosh, כתבו, כן, they already wrote this, they also wrote this, בפרק הנזכר, the aforementioned פרק, ודברים אלו, סותרים זה את זה, so there's a contradiction here, right? I mentioned this yesterday before we finished, that, because the truth is that once the candle has already burnt for a half hour, you should be able to use that oil. There's no problem because the mitzvah is over. So then why is it telling you here that you shouldn't use it? So the way I reconcile it yesterday is that, it could be that we're talking about a case where it didn't burn for a half hour. Let's say it went out, whatever, by mistake or whatever it was, by accident. So in a case like that, you could not use it because you have the forbidden oil there. So that's the way I answered it. Let's see what he answers here. That's also says in Ran, שהגאונים שאומרים, that the Geonim who say, שאם כבתה, that if it was extinguished, ונשאר שמן ביום הראשון, and the oil was left over on the first day, as we said, מוסיף עליו ומדליק ביום שני. You can use that right for the next day. נשאר בה ביום האחרון, what about the last day? עושה לו מדורה ושורפו. So then you got to burn it, as we said, right? במקומו, on its place. שהרי הוקצה למצוותו. Why is that? Because it was already designated for the mitzvah. הם חולקים על מה שכתב הריף. So he says, they're arguing on what the Rif said. שאם הייתה דולקת והולכת עד שיעור. הזה, that if it was going at that time, right, half hour, ורצה לכבותה, and he wanted to extinguish it, או להשתמש לאורה, to use the light, הרשות בידו, that he has the permission to do so. It's permitted. אבל אין נראה כן מדברי הראש, but it says from the Rosh, doesn't seem that way. שאף על פי שכתב סברה זו, דעושה לו מדורה, that even though he wrote this, right, halacha, this rule, you got to make a fire, and burn it. בשם השאילתות, in the name of this rabbi, אם איתה שהיה סובר, if it was true that he held, שהיא חולקת על הסברה ראשונה, that this argues what we said beforehand, right? It's contradiction, as we pointed out. So he says, then the Rosh should have written these two things, right, juxtaposed one to the other. Why? Because this way we would understand, right, that there's a contradiction or whatever. רבנו פשוט הוא שסובר שאינן חולקות, so he says, right, that so he says the Torah, it's clear, he says, the Bet Yosef says, that the Torah holds that there is no contradiction here. שהרי כתב לשתיהן סתם, because he wrote both of them, right, as a halacha. ומצאתי כתוב בשם מארי אבוהב. So if they're both halacha, that means that they don't contradict, right? That's the whole thing. So as I found in this rabbi, Zal sheyesh lechalek benehem. So he says what we do is we make a differentiation, right, to reconcile them. כשנתן השמן בנר ולא יוקצה, אלא לשיעור זמן הדלקה, יכול אחר כך להסתפק ממנו אם ירצה, אבל כשנתן השמן בנר בסתם, אז הוקצה למצוות חנוכה וצריך לעשות לא זה התיקון עד כדי שנה. So this rabbi answers it a different way, right? Not like the way I did it. Let me just explain to you what he's saying. Let's make sure we got this right. So he says that the two cases are different. Why? Because one case is talking about that he put the oil inside the candle, but he didn't designate it. He just placed it in there. He poured it in, and he didn't designate it for the sake of the mitzvah. So he says, but he did designate only 1/2 hour. In other words, he went out of his way. That's what he's saying, right? To designate it only for the 1/2 hour. So therefore, the rest of it is not a part of the mitzvah. That's what he's saying. So then he says, if that's the case, then he could use it because, right, he went out of his way, he specifically pointed out that only the 1/2 hour is sanctified. וצריך לעשות לו זה התיקון. But it says in the other case, where we say that he can't use it, got to burn it. So what are we talking about? But if he put the oil in the candle, right, without making any conditions or anything like that, any, right, undefined. So there he says the whole thing gets sanctified for the mitzvah. Right? So right away you can see, right, that there's a problem here with the way he explains it. Right off the bat, there's a problem here. The problem is, that why should you need to make a condition if the sages already said, right, that only 1/2 hour is sanctified? So you don't need a condition for that, so therefore, right, I can tell you right away that probably his theory here is going to be rejected because it doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's see what the Bet Yosef says. Right? I'm jumping ahead a little bit, right? I'm getting ahead of myself, but I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. So anyway, says Bet Yosef, ולא נראה לחלק ביניהם בעניין אחר, שמא שכתב. So it says, so says Bet Yosef, it seems to me that there's another way to differentiate, right? Not the way that this rabbi said. As we said, right, the way he says it is not really so solid. Yeah.
Forgive me, Rabbi Kavod Harav, which rabbi said this?
This was Mari Avuhav.
Thank you.
Yeah, this rabbi Avuhav, but if you ask Esther, she's going to tell you, right, that that's a Spanish name, no? Esther.
Yes, it sounds Spanish.
Yeah, there was a Spanish family, Jewish family called Avuhav. By the way, they're still around today. These people, you still find people who have this name, Avuhav. Right, so they're still around, Baruch Hashem. So this rabbi was in Spain. Not only was he in Spain, by the way, but he was also one of the rabbis of Maran Bet Yosef. He was one of his rebbes. So Maran learned from him, at a certain time in his life. He also learned from other rabbis as well. That wasn't his only rabbi, right? But anyway, right? It's a funny thing, What's a funny thing? That right? Maran, every time he brings this rabbi, right, when he quotes him, which is a lot, by the way, in the material that we covered, it's quite often. So what I'm saying is like this, right? That he always builds him up and puts him on a pedestal. He says this great rabbi, because it was his Rebbe on the one hand, right? On the other hand, he always argues with him. So it's like a double entendre going on here, right? Always with this rabbi. On the one hand, he builds him up, puts him on a pedestal, and then he knocks him out, right? Knocks him down and says, no, he's wrong. So yeah, it's a funny pattern that we see, right? That goes going on with that. By the way, in the other sections of the Shulchan Aruch, right? Yoredeya, Ebenezer, over there you don't find this rabbi brought down. Only like in Orach Chaim, in the beginning, like the parts that we're doing now. But afterwards, he seems to drop out of the picture. Not really mentioned in the Bet Yosef very often. In Yoredeya, I never heard his name mentioned right over there in the Bet Yosef, right? Or in Ebenezer or Choshen Mishpat. Never heard his name. So it must be that he only wrote on Orach Chaim, this rabbi. Otherwise, he would have mentioned it over there as well. So anyway, it's an interesting story, right? By the way, you should know that, we mentioned, right, that this rabbi comes from Spain, and his name is still around, not only is he still around, this name, but also the name Karo, which is the name of Maran Bet Yosef, right, is still around also. There are still people today, Sephardi Jews that have the name Karo. There you go, right? So that's the way it is.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, there's still there. I've seen the people who have this name, Spanish with Spanish descent. Caro. There's also another name, right? The name of the Rambam, which is Maimon, right? His name was Moshe ben Maimon. So until this day, there are Sephardi Jews that have the name Maimon, right? And why is that? Because they're descended from the Rambam. That's why.
Yes.
Yes, they have the name. They don't call themselves Ben Maimon, like they just say Maimon. But those people, I had a doctor, by the way, that I met in Israel who had this name. I asked him, "Are you from the Rambam?" He says, "Yes, I am." I said, "Okay, well, that's very nice. I'm glad I have a doctor like you, right?" He was also a doctor of the Rambam, as you know, right? Okay, so there you go, right? So the tradition in the family continues. There's also another name, right? Sephardi name, which was not from Spain, but from Morocco, right? His name was El Fasi, right? The Rif. What does it stand for, the Rif? Rabbi Yitzchak El Fasi, right? Why is it called El Fasi? Does anybody know this? Right? It's like, what's the meaning of these names, these Sephardi names, right? El Ghazi, right? El Fasi, right? Why they El? What's this El business? Anyway, right? His name was Rabbi Yitzchak El Fasi, and I also met people who had this name Al Fasi. Right? In America, there are people who have this name Al Fasi. Guess what? They're descended from the Rif. These people. We still have these people, around. Incredible, right? I can tell you a lot of things about this. I don't want to go on too much, right? I don't want to get distracted, right? But that's the way it is. So anyway, right? Okay. So yeah, he was in Morocco, right? So the reason why, they use this El, right? What does this mean, El? El Fasi, right? El Baz, right? What is this, all this business? So there's a place in Morocco which is called Fez, right? Fez, one of the cities, right? So El Fazi means he comes from that town, right? Fez, El Fasi. That's the way it is. The way it is, right? What about the name Toledano, right? There's a lot of big rabbis, right, who have this name Toledano,
From
right?
Toledo?
Also,
Italian.
right, exactly. Yeah, they're Spanish, also Spanish descent, right?
Yeah.
They don't say El Toledo, they say Toledano,
Toledano.
right? So why not El Toledo? Why Toledano?
Leon, my last name also comes from Toledo. Leon.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay, so why Toledano, right? So I heard from somebody, right? That means that, the word no, right, is like no, right, in English. Same thing, right, in Spanish. No, señor, right? Why? Because that means that we reject Toledo. In other words, we were expelled, right, from Spain. So we reject them, Toledano, no more Toledo.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes.
So that gives you a hint, by the way, Esther. Don't right? Don't you shouldn't want to go back to Spain. Toledano, right?
Yeah. And already went. Oh
You got to
boy.
reject them because they rejected us. So
Yeah. True.
that's the way it is. Okay. Anyway, getting back to our discussion, right? These are very great people. These rabbis from Spain, big people. The giants of the land. Okay. So anyway, right? As we said, that Maran has a different way of explaining it, right? Doesn't like this explanation. בעניין אחר, שמה שכתב בסימן תרע"ב מעירה שנתן בה ביניהם שמן יותר מכשיעור, ביחד שדלק כשיעור מותר ליהנות ממנו. So he says, when we say that it's allowed, what we're saying is that he put extra oil there. So whatever is extra past a half hour, that you're allowed to use, right? That's what we said yesterday, right? Before before we finished. So what do you call it? So he says that's the way it's permitted. Now, what's the way that it's forbidden? So he says, דלא הוקצה מצווה, כדי שיעור שצריך בלבד. ומה שכתב בסימן זה, but he says, whatever it's written over here, that you have to burn it, מילא כשנותר מהשמן הצריך לשיעור הדקה, הוא הוקצה למצוותו, ולפיכך, right? So he says, the stuff that was left over was for the mitzvah, right? As I said, right? That's my answer. So I guess, I'm not doing too bad, right? If I guess the answer of Maran. Okay, so that's the story, right? That's the way it works. I hope you understand. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. So anyway, right? So therefore, right, since the leftover oil is from the mitzvah part, as we said, right, because it went out too early or something, right? Some reason like that. So there, you got to burn it, right? There's no other way to fix the problem. Right? You're not allowed to get any benefit from it, so therefore you got to burn it. Right? That's what it says also in Hagaot Maimoniot. Okay, so he says now we can deduce from here, right? By the way, this is one of the words. If you're interested in Hebrew etymology, right? The word medak, right over here. What says over here in the Bet Yosef, what's the root of this word? Dikduk, right? Which means like deduction, right? So you see the similarity in the structure. Dikduk, deduction. It's the same root of the word, right? So the English here is mimicking the Hebrew. You see, deduce, right? Dikduk, dak. So it's the same root of the word, right? In English as it is in Hebrew. And by the way, there's a book written on this, you should know. Some rabbi bothered to write a book that he traces a lot of the foreign words, from English and French to Hebrew. That they're right. The root etymology is from there. So there's a lot of words like this. This is one of them, right? Lemedak, right? Dikduk, deduction. Lama tzarich la'asot midura. So he says, now he asks a question, right? Still, we have to ask a question. Why do you have to make a fire, and burn it, right? Lemotar Hashem, and to the leftover oil, the petilot, and also the wicks. Ma'ishna me'atzeh sukkah. So he says, why is that any different from the wood of the sukkah, right? That we build the sukkah with wood. So there also, right? The wood is sanctified for the mitzvah of sukkah. So you can't use it for other purposes, right? But also the decorations, right, that are allowed. But there, right, when it comes to Sukkot, it's only forbidden during the holiday. But after the holiday, it becomes permitted, right? So the question is, why is that any different than Chanuka, right, where we say even after the holiday is forbidden? Why do we make a differentiation like this? This is what he's trying to ask, right? That's his question. So he says, so he says, the Ran already answered this question. Okay, very good, right? By the way, this is also another Spanish rabbi, right? The Ran. Who's the Ran? What's his name? Right? It's an abbreviation, right? Rabbeinu Nissim, right? Migeronda.
Kavod Harav, is he the one who wrote the confession, Rabbeinu Nissim?
I think so. But there's also, by the way, there's also another Ran who was like earlier, from the Geonim. But this Ran, right, that we have here, he was a Spanish rabbi, and he was from Gironda. That was the city that he was from. So yeah, he was also one of the big Rishonim, one of the big right. By the way, the early authorities, people pointed it out to me. Most of them are Sephardi, right? The Rishonim, as opposed to the later authorities, right? There's a lot of Ashkenazi ones, but the earlier authorities are mostly, Sephardi rabbis. Anyway, right? Probably like, I don't know, 70%, I don't know, 80%. Anyway, so he says, right, "Hatam lo mukse v'noyed lehu ela lemei hachag lefi she'asuin leishaer achar hachag." So he says there it's different. Why? The Ran says because when it comes to the sukkah, right, the reason why we say that after the holiday it's permitted is because it's only sanctified for the days of the holiday. In other words, that's the specific intention there. Why is that? Because it's made to stay afterwards. In other words, the wood doesn't get damaged by using it for a sukkah. So in theory, you could use it afterwards for some other purpose. Let's say for firewood, right? Let's say you want to make a bonfire, whatever, right? Heat your house, right? Whatever. And so you could do that after the holiday is over. ולא מקצה לו למצוותן. So he says לגמרי, but it's not for the mitzvah on totally. What does that mean? That it's meant to be a temporary sanctity, right? Only during the holiday, when it comes to sukkah. That's the way it is. אבל שמן ופתילה שעשויים להתבאר לגמרי, but he says when it comes to the oil, right, and the wicks, which are meant to be totally burned on Chanuka, so there it's like totally sanctified forever, right? So it never gets desanctified, right? Whatever, right? What do you want to call it, right? Then Adam מצפה מתי תכבה נרו, because a person is not expecting his ner, his candle to go out, right? So he can use it to make, to put in a salad, right? Olive oil for a salad. ואם נשתערו הרי זה אסורים. So it says, therefore, if it's left over, it's forbidden, right? And by the way, so I think it is that Rabbeinu Nissim, right? The one who wrote the confession there. It's the same guy, yes, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, right? Share iksa otan lemitzvatan. There's also another Rabbeinu Nissim, which we call him Rabbeinu Nissim Gaon. He was one of the Gaonim, right? So this is a different guy, like because the Gaonim were not really in Spain. You know what I mean? The Gaonim were earlier period. These rabbis were like more in the Middle East, like Morocco or Iraq, right, or that area, Syria, right, that those areas. The Geonim were mostly there, right? There was no Geonim in Europe. You know what I mean? Once the Jews got to Europe, the Geonic period was already over. So that's pretty much the story. Okay. Anyway. Perhaps with the exception of Rabbeinu Gershom, right? Who I think he lived in Europe. I'm not sure 100%. To check that. Anyway, we call him Rabbeinu Gershom Mahor Gola, right? One of the big rabbis of the Ashkenazim. Like before, he was before Rashi.
Wasn't that Rashi's rabbi? No.
Not that I know of, but I have to check that. I gotta check. I gotta catch up on my history.
Thank you.
We'll get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Okay, God willing. Doing another. So as we said, right, that was Rabbeinu Gershom, So getting back to what we said. That's the way the Ran answers this question. So he says, So he said that resembles like the wood of the sukkah and the decorations which fell on the holiday. They're forbidden, right? What does that mean? They're forbidden during the holiday. They're forbidden. Like it says in this parak, right in Betzah Lamed Amud Bet. Okay. So he says it doesn't resemble the candle of Shabbat either, which is made for totally the mitzvah. We already mentioned this before, right? That when it comes to Shabbat candles, we are supposed to get benefit from it, right? That's the whole point of it. That's what the rabbis made the mitzvah for. Right? So there it's a different story altogether. Can't compare one to the other. So therefore, you can also use it right after Shabbat, whatever's left over there, right, for other purposes, whatever, right? You want to fry some latkes or whatever you want to do, right? Mina shemen, omina patila, also the wicks, mishum dehatam ab beodot dole, because even there he says, even when it's lit, the Shabbat candles, לעצמו, למצוותו, נהנים ממנו, you're allowed to get benefit from it. מה שאין כן בנר חנוכה, not when it comes to Chanuka, right? כי יוצא בזה כתבו התוספות. Tosfot also writes this answer. בפרק קירה, right? Same as the Ram. Okay, good. All right, there you go. So yeah, so the Balei Tosfot, by the way, these were like, some of them in France, some of them in Germany, right? And also some other European countries. That's where they came from, right? They were founded by the students of Rashi, right? Like Rabbeinu Tam, who was his grandson, and the Rashbam, and so forth, so on. All these rabbis. These are the Balei Tosfot that came afterwards, right? Who were from the school, basically, of Rashi, but they were like from his family, and they continued that tradition, that whatever. Okay, so anyway, right, that's the other side, the Ashkenazi side, right? France, Germany, right, that side. Okay, so most of the Rishonim of the Ashkenazim were from this school of thought, right? From the Tosfot. There was many Balei Tosfot, by the way. There was like dozens of them. But there was like a few famous ones, which are always mentioned. Rabbeinu Tam, right? And the Ri, right? These are the famous ones. Always mentioned everywhere. Okay, whatever. Anyway, let's go on a little bit. So he says, ואם נתערב ממנו ואין 60 לבטלו, כתב הר"ם שאין להוסיף עליו כדי לבטלו, right? Also, another thing we said yesterday was that if it was mixed, with a mixture, right? This forbidden oil from Chanuka, you shouldn't add more to it, like, permitted oil in order to nullify it, 60th, right? You can't do this lechatchila to nullify it like that. B'diavad, by the way, if it happened, it got nullified, it's nullified. But you shouldn't do it lechatchila, like on purpose. Anyway, in this case, right, there are some cases, by the way, we are allowed to do it on purpose. Usually, it's cases where the prohibition is rabbinical, so then we do allow to nullify it even purposely. Anyway, by the way, if you say that, the question comes up, Hanukkah is also rabbinical, so then why didn't they allow it here? So it must be that the sages were like more stringent when it comes to Hanukkah, because it's like a publication of the miracle. So I guess they were more serious about it. They decreed, more in a stringent fashion, in several ways. Anyway, getting back to what we said, right? So where are we holding here? The Beit Yosef is done. Okay, so we'll just do Shulchan Aruch and we're done. Okay, beautiful. Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so it says in Shulchan Aruch like this: Hanotar b'yom hashmini, right? Whatever is left over from the 8th day, right? The oil, min hashemen, right? Hatzarich shel shiur hadlaka, which was needed for the half hour, right? Oselo medura besorfo. So what do? You make a fire, and you burn it, right? As we said, you can't get any benefit from it. By itself, right? You gotta do it by itself. Because it was already sanctified for the mitzvah. If it got mixed with a different oil, and there's not 60th there to nullify it. So there is one that says you shouldn't add oil to nullify it with 60, right? As we said in the Beit Yosef. So there you go, right? I think Shoshana had a question over here for Chanuka, right? Would you like to ask us now?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Okay, so anyway, right? Wish you Good night and Chazak Baruch. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. See you tomorrow, Bezat Hashem. Everything will work out tomorrow. I do have some things going on tomorrow, so if something happens, I'll let you know, right? Hopefully I won't have to cancel anything. For now we're on, right? Unless otherwise, right? Unless otherwise stated.
God willing, you will be here. If not,
God willing. Okay. Thank you for that. Thanks for the blessing. Okay, so anyway, right?
We understand.
Bezat Hashem. Keep praying for the great soldiers that are doing an amazing job, right? Wiping out all the Nazis over there. Bezat Hashem. That's just the beginning, you know. We're gonna wipe out all of Amalek. Bezat Hashem. It's a mitzvah from the Torah, right? You have to remember to wipe out Amalek. So we'll start from here, you know, from Gaza, and we'll continue until they're all wiped out. Bezat Hashem. Amen ve'amen.
Amen. Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.